There is something in space that should never be opened. A fracture in reality left behind on purpose. And the moment humanity reached it, we stopped being alone. The cosmic rift is not just a phenomenon, it is a scar, a tear in space that behaves in ways we don't fully understand, unstable, unpredictable, and yet impossible to ignore. Which is exactly why humanity decided to study it, pouring decades of effort into observing, measuring, and eventually trying to break through it, believing that whatever was on the other side could change everything. At first, the approach was careful, distant, almost respectful, but that didn't last long because curiosity always grows faster than caution. And over time, missions became more aggressive, more experimental, pushing closer and closer to the rift itself, testing new technologies designed to survive environments that should have been impossible to endure. What started as observation quickly turned into interaction, then into intrusion, and eventually into access. New spacecraft were built, specialized for this exact purpose, engineered to withstand gravitational distortions and unknown radiation, allowing humanity to approach the rift in ways that would have been unthinkable just decades earlier. And for a brief moment, it felt like control was finally within reach. But the rift had already begun to change things, not just physically, but behaviorally. It became a destination, not just for scientists and military operations, but for curiosity itself, attracting attention from across society, even turning into something people wanted to see with their own eyes, standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable, believing they were witnessing the future. Over time, research expanded across the outer planets, with stations forming near the rifts surrounding massive gas giants, carefully monitoring their behavior, mapping fluctuations, searching for patterns. But one region remained untouched, avoided entirely, either because it seemed inactive or because it felt wrong. Then, after nearly a century of study, something changed. Not gradually, but suddenly. A breakthrough, a way to move beyond observation, a project designed to cross the threshold, not just look into the rift, but go through it. And that's when everything stopped being theoretical. Because when the first deep mission approached one of the largest rift scars, something appeared on the other side. Something massive, structured, and clearly not human. A presence that didn't behave like a natural phenomenon, but like something engineered. Something watching. At first, there was no hostility, no attack, just silence. And that silence was worse, because it meant intention. The planet below the observation point suddenly changed, its surface activity collapsing into stillness, as if something had shut it down completely. Not destroyed, but disabled, rendered inert by a force that operated on a level far beyond anything humanity had developed. And that's when the situation shifted from observation to encounter. Without warning, the ship lost control, systems responding to an external force that locked onto it, pulling it away from its intended path, overriding commands, guiding it toward the unknown structure, not aggressively, but with precision, as if it had done this many times before. There was no escape, no maneuver that worked, no system that responded, only movement, forward. And then, arrival. The expectation was destruction. Instead, there was contact. The beings that emerged were unlike anything humanity had imagined, not just biologically different, but fundamentally advanced, calm, controlled, as if they had seen this moment happen many times before, as if humanity arriving here was not surprising, but expected. And that was the first realization. This was not first contact, not for them. They already knew. They had been watching for a very long time. They explained that humanity was not unique in discovering the rift, not the first to reach it, not even the first to survive it, but something else entirely, something they referred to as a potential, a civilization capable of rebuilding after total collapse, a species that had already faced extinction-level events and recovered, something rare and valuable. Because most don't. Most disappear. But humanity didn't, and that made it different. According to them, the rifts were not natural. They were constructed, created under pressure, forced into existence by something far more powerful, something they described not as creators, but as enforcers. Entities that arrive when a planet reaches a certain stage, not to observe, not to communicate, but to claim. They called them the taxmen, not as a joke, but as a function. Because when a civilization reaches a certain level of development, when a planet becomes active in a specific way, these entities arrive to collect something not fully explained, something tied to the existence of the planet itself. And there is no negotiation, no defense, only outcome. The species standing before humanity had once faced them and lost. Their world had been taken, not destroyed randomly, but processed, like it had a purpose. And once that purpose was fulfilled, it was gone. That was the second realization. This wasn't exploration, it was part of a system, one that had been running long before humanity existed and would continue long after, unless something changed. Because before their destruction, they had done something risky. They altered the rifts, not enough to stop the process, but enough to leave behind imperfections, scars, residual weaknesses, points where the system could be disrupted. But there was a problem. Only a certain kind of species would ever reach that point. Only one driven enough, curious enough, reckless enough to open something they didn't understand. Humanity. And that was the third realization. This was never random. Humanity wasn't just discovering the rift, it was following a path, one that others had prepared, hoping someone would eventually reach this point and try something different. Because over generations, they had been working on a solution, not a weapon to fight the entities directly, but something else, a way to stop the process before it begins, a method to reverse planetary activation, to make a world invisible, to remove it from whatever system the taxmen operate within. And they had tested it. That silent planet, the one that suddenly went dark, that wasn't destruction, it was protection, a forced shutdown, a way to avoid being noticed. Because once a planet is fully awake, it's already too late. And now humanity stood at the edge of that same threshold, closer than it had ever been, without realizing it, advancing, expanding, activating. And somewhere, beyond everything we can see, something is already watching, waiting. Not if, but when. Because the final truth is this: the rift was never meant to be opened, it was meant to be found.